Hi there, welcome to Kneppy Invests. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on Kogan and trying to figure out whether Kogan is a buy right now at a share price of $5.33. Now, if we look at the chart for Kogan, it has been a horror story for shareholders since about October 2020. And if we go back to October 2020, share price of Kogan reached $25, which means the share price has dropped 80% in the past 17 months. That is a significant drop in share price during that period of time. And this is the chart going back to then. And the share price has been dropping at a fairly consistent rate during that period. There have been fair few bad news periods during this time where we have seen share price of Kogan drop a fair bit in one day. And it really started back in November last year, or November 2020, when share price dropped 17% in one day. And that was on the back of news about the vaccine. So this wasn't company-specific news. It was just a change in thematics. These companies that were benefiting from COVID-19, from the lockdowns, people thought, well, these tailwinds were coming to an end. That's why we did see a bit of a sell-off in Kogan back in November of 2020. And then in January 21, share price dropped 8%. In fact, it dropped about 6% one day on the 28th of January. Then the 29th of January, it fell another 9%. That was bad company-specific news. And that was the start of the downtrend in Kogan. So this really started in January 2021 on the back of some negative news. And we've seen numerous periods during this time period where Kogan share price has dropped a lot. For instance, it dropped 10% on the 26th of February, which would have been half-year results. It dropped 14% on the 23rd of January 2021. It dropped 10% on the 30th of June 2021. It dropped 16% on the 24th of August 2021. It dropped about 7% back there. I can't even know the date. So let's have a look at the date. 18th of January 2022. And then another further 12% on the 27th of January 2022. So share price has been influenced by negative news from this company, and that's why the share price has been a downtrend. There's been a few times when it looked like maybe the share price wanted to break out, particularly in the middle of last year. You can see around this period here, which I'm just circling with my mouse, it did look like the share price wanted to run off. There was a really sort of I won't say capitulation, but it looked like it could have been capitulation on the 21st of May. That's when the share price dropped 14%, but the share price recovered fairly quickly. And the share price around then was $9 to $10, and did look like the share price was trying to consolidate. But continual release of bad news has really affected Kogan's share price. Now, the reason I am becoming interested in Kogan is just the long-term trend. And I'm going to go to the weekly chart to show you the long-term trend for Kogan right now. It's really interesting. And I'm going to get rid of the moving averages because it's not really applicable for this. So if we look at the weekly chart, going back to when Kogan listed on the ASX, and from when it listed on the ASX for the next year, the share price just went sideways. But if we zoom in there, we can see during 2017, share price of Kogan went through the roof. In fact, it increased from $1.50 to a high of $9 in less than 1 year. And right here, I'm just going to put in a trend line. So this is the long-term trend, and I'm going to start it at this point right there, which was the low before we started to see the share price go on a run. So this is moving in waves. Kogan share price does move in waves, both the short, intermediate, and long term. So I'm just going to focus on the long-term waves in Kogan share price. So I'm not going to really focus on any of these short-term moves like here or here or here. I'm going to focus on the next long-term low. And that next long-term low was in November 2018. And actually coincided with a general malaise in the market back then, because there was a fear that the Fed in the United States was going to start raising interest rates. And we did see a lot of tech stocks sell off at that point in time. So that was the next long-term low in Kogan share price. The next long-term low actually occurred during the COVID-19 financial panic. And there it is right there. So that was a little bit of a short-term blip. So it only occurred over about a month and a half. Share price of Kogan actually the bottom in the share price of Kogan actually occurred about March 13, not March 23, with the just like the rest of the companies or a lot of the other companies on the ASX around the world. So let's just have a look at that, which I do find interesting. So we have to go back in time. So here is, there was actually some bad news released on 23rd of January, and that's why share price dropped 22% on that particular day. We seem to sort of ignore that news because share price kept on falling, and the low in Kogan actually occurred on the 13th of March, as I mentioned. And before we saw the bottom of the market, the 23rd of March, Kogan share price had started to run up by then. I think the market at that point in time knew Kogan was really going to benefit from COVID-19. And then we saw the share price go on a massive run. So if we go back to the weekly chart, and what we're doing here is looking for the next long-term low. Potentially we have not reached that, but if we continue on the trend, what we've been seeing since the life Kogan has been on the ASX, and just follow that trend, look where we are right now. That long-term trend is right where the share price is at this point in time. Not only that, if you look at the weekly chart, the share price has been going sideways over the past 4 weeks, right on this trend line. If we take a look at the daily chart, you'll be able to see that quite well. There it is. So when you look at the daily chart, the share price has gone below the long-term trend on occasion. The first time it went below that line, or that long-term trend, was the 25th of February, when they released the half-yearly results. And a lot of buying came in during that day. In fact, the share price reached $4.50. So obviously, the market did not initially like those results, but potentially the market saw value, long-term value, because this is the long-term trend. So you're going to get those investors who are long-term thinkers seeing value when the share price of Kogan gets less than $5. So it's been less than $5 on 2 occasions the past few weeks, we'll say 3 or 4 weeks, and on each time it gets below $5, we do see some buying coming in. And the other thing to take into account here and take notice here is on those up days where we do see those buy, there is a lot of volume or more volume coming in those days. So there is some participants in the market getting excited. So this is one of the reasons I'm a little bit more excited about Kogan right now. Share price at $5.33, 80% drop in share price since its highs of $25 in October 2020. I do think there is value for this company at a market cap of $500 million. I do think Kogan will grow at fairly good rates over the next few years, 5 years. So if you are a long-term investor, now could be the time to take initial position in this company or add to your position in this company. Let's have a look at some of the financials of Kogan. So what I've got here is revenues and cash flows from operations half yearly over the past, well, ever since they listed on the ASX. And revenues have been climbing through time. Now, the last 3.5 years, revenues have been going sideways because we saw significant tailwinds behind this period, behind this company in 2020. That's why revenue rose from 219 million to 414 million in 1 year, and they've just gone sideways since then. So this company's not getting smaller. Put it that way, it's still growing. But because they had significant growth 2 years ago, during 2020, I think it's just catching up. And I think we'll continue to see growth in Kogan over the next 5 years. In the last half year, they were operating cash flow positive, 61.7 million. Now, that could be because of numerous things. They don't actually mention this is ticker. And when you do look at their cash flow statement, there is a change in net working capital just below the cash from operations line, but it's only on a yearly basis. If you go back to the yearly, there was a change in working capital of 82 million. So there could be a significant change in capital, which might have increased the cash flow from operations in this particular half year. But things aren't going bad for Kogan when you look at the long term. There are definitely some short-term issues, and there have been some short-term issues for Kogan in the past year. Looking at the warehouse, I think they increased the inventories too much, that sort of thing. But I think online spending will increase. I think that thematic definitely is still there for this company. And I just think it's short-term negative sentiment that's been driving the share price of this company down. And this is the exact thing you want to see if you're a long-term investor, to buy these sort of companies that you think will grow in the future at lower valuation. So right now is a potential opportunity for those who think, and not everyone's going to think this, but for those who think that there is a long-term potential for Kogan. That's all I have for this video on Kogan and whether it is buy or not. Now, in my opinion, whether Kogan is a buy is all dependent on the type of investor you are, your time range. So if you are a long-term investor, I think there is potential opportunity right now. If you're a short-term investor, or say maybe a short-term trader, there's really no signals to take a position in Kogan yet because the share price is in a well-defined downtrend. It's continuing in a well-defined downtrend because if we just have a look at the chart, the daily chart, put in 2 moving averages, the share price is still decreasing and there is still bad news with this company, and whether that bad news has come to an end, we'll just have to wait and see. One of the things I do like to wait for is the first good financial news a company releases after a slew of bad news of financial news from a company. And I would also like to see the share price just consolidate for a period, go sideways. Those 2 moving averages, in fact, I look at 4 moving averages. So those 2 moving averages to sort of close together, which would tell me that volatility is coming to an end. And whenever you see volatility sort of dying out, when a company's share price starts to consolidate, that's actually potential good news because eventually you will see some volatility. And if that volatility or the increase in volatility coincides with some good financial news from the company, that's when you might start to see the share price rising and moving into a new uptrend. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. If you do need financial advice, make sure you seek out someone who is qualified and can speak to your own financial needs. That's it for this video. Have a good day. Bye.